The scent of gasoline and metal clung to the air inside a small corner garage on the outskirts of Detroit. It wasn't much, a corrugated tin roof, cracked concrete floors, and aging tools, but for Yeet Dillon, more, it was everything. 36, wiry, with oil-streaked hands and tired blue eyes, Dillon had spent the last 4 years holding this place together while raising his son, Eli. Now 9. Life had thrown punches since his wife passed, but Dillon met them all with quiet resolve. His days were long, nights longer, but his heart never stopped beating for the boy who called him Dad. That Tuesday afternoon had started like any other. Dillon was elbow-deep in a rusted-out pickup's engine, sweat trickling down his temples when a distant siren screamed. It grew louder, more urgent. Then, suddenly, silence. Tires screeched just outside the shop. Curious, Dillon stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. An ambulance was idling unevenly by the curb, its front hood popped open. A paramedic shouted into the radio, frustration thick in his voice, "We've lost power. We can't get her to the hospital." Dillon didn't hesitate. He ran over, barely pausing to ask, "Pop the hood all the way. I'll take a look." The paramedic hesitated, torn between protocol and panic. But one glance toward the back doors, where another medic hovered over an unconscious patient, made the choice for him. Dillon's hands moved fast. He diagnosed the problem in seconds. A corroded battery terminal and loose alternator belt. His fingers flew, tightening connections, borrowing a bolt from his own toolbox. Sweat mixed with grime. His shirt stuck to his back. Minutes ticked. The paramedics stood over him, tense. Then the ambulance roared back to life. "Go," Dillon barked, slamming the hood. Without a word, the driver nodded and sped off into traffic, sirens howling again. Dillon stood there, heart pounding, watching the taillights vanish. He didn't even know who they were rushing to save. He just hoped it was in time. By the time he returned to his garage, his manager, Don, was waiting, arms crossed, lips tight. "I told you, no distractions during work hours," Don growled. "That was a dying person in an ambulance," Dillon replied, chest still heaving. "I couldn't just—" "I don't care," Don snapped. "I warned you last time. You leave the bay without permission again, you're done." Dillon said nothing. His hands were still shaking from adrenaline, but Don's next words hit harder than any engine backfire. "You're fired." It didn't matter that Dillon had kept this place afloat with overtime and busted knuckles. One moment of compassion, and everything came crashing down. He walked home that evening with Eli's small hand in his, unsure how to explain that the world didn't always reward the right thing. But far across the city, in a private hospital suite, a man lay unconscious. The man whose life Dillon had just saved. And when that man woke up, nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Dillon sat at the kitchen table with Eli, watching the boy spoon cereal with a quiet focus that only kids seem to have. The apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast. Bills lay unopened on the counter. Dillon's toolbox sat by the door like a loyal dog with nowhere to go. He tried to smile, but Eli noticed. "Did something bad happen at work, Dad?" Dillon looked up, searching for the right words. "Just a bump in the road, bud. Nothing we can't handle." But his voice cracked on the last word. Across the city, in a sleek, glass-walled hospital, Julian Hart, 44, stirred beneath a layer of sterile white sheets. Monitors beeped softly around him. Silver hair, sharp jawline, and a stitched wound above his brow gave him the look of a man who'd seen the edge, and decided to come back. When his eyes opened, they were piercing gray, alert but searching. "Where?" he rasped. A nurse entered quickly. "You're in Hartview General, Mr. Hart. You collapsed in your car. There was a delay, but an emergency repair got the ambulance running again." Julian frowned. "Delay?" The nurse hesitated. "A mechanic fixed the engine. Just a local guy. You were unconscious when they brought you in." Julian lay silent for a long time. Heartview General wasn't just a hospital. It bore his name. Julian Hart, founder and CEO of Heartline Automotive. One of the country's biggest luxury electric car brands, had built his empire from nothing. He trusted systems, not people. But now he was alive because one stranger ignored protocol and helped. Later that day, Julian was discharged with a private escort, but instead of going home, he asked to be taken to the site of the ambulance breakdown. His assistant, Mara, raised an eyebrow as the car pulled up to the old garage. "It happened here?" Julian asked, stepping out. Mara nodded. "The guy's name is Dylan Moore, single dad, lives nearby." Julian scanned the shop. Empty. The bay doors were closed. Rust lined the edges of the awning. He could feel the ghosts of grit and urgency hanging in the air. "Find him," Julian said quietly. Meanwhile, Dylan stood in a job center, resume in hand, waiting in line behind tired men in overwashed flannel. Mechanic work wasn't glamorous, but it had always kept the lights on. Now, with no job and no savings, the walls were closing in. Eli deserved more than this. He deserved hope. Back home, they shared mac and cheese for dinner. Dylan drew a car on a napkin for Eli, trying to distract him from the tension. The boy laughed and added a rocket booster. They both smiled, just a moment of peace. But on the street below, a black luxury sedan idled quietly, watching their window. Julian sat inside, a folded paper in hand. Dylan's resume, printed off by his assistant. He read it again, slowly, then looked up at the dim apartment light. He didn't know this man, but he owed him a second chance. And soon, Dylan would find out that one act of integrity could shift the entire course of a life. The morning sun filtered through the thin blinds of Dylan's apartment. It was Saturday. Normally, he would have been at the garage by now, greasy hands under a hood, Eli visiting on lunch breaks with a peanut butter sandwich and that proud grin. But today was quiet. Too quiet. Dylan stood at the window sipping instant coffee, watching the world move on without him. Every minute out of work chipped at his pride. He was a man who fixed things, engines, bicycles, broken toasters, but right now he couldn't fix his own life. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the door. He opened it, expecting the landlord or another flyer from the temp agency. Instead, there stood a sharply dressed woman holding a tablet, her eyes scanning the apartment with practiced precision. "Mr. Dylan Moore?" Yeah." She extended a business card. "Mara Jennings, executive assistant to Julian Hart. My employer would like to speak with you." Dylan blinked, confused. "Wait, Julian Hart? Heartline Automotive? He said you fixed an ambulance and saved his life." Dylan's jaw tightened. He hadn't done it for recognition, just instinct. "I got fired for that." Mara's expression softened. "That may have been a mistake. He'd like to make it right." Eli poked his head from behind the sofa, cereal bowl in hand. "Dad? Who is it?" "Someone from work, buddy. Finish your breakfast." Within the hour, Dylan found himself in a private lounge in one of the tallest buildings in the city. Clean marble floors, polished glass, a wall of awards honoring Julian Hart's empire. Dylan felt underdressed in his old flannel and oil-stained jeans. Julian walked in with a cane and a small limp, but his presence filled the room. Gray hair slicked back, a tailored black suit, and eyes sharp with gratitude. "You're the mechanic who saved me," he said, extending a hand. Dylan shook it awkwardly. "Wasn't much, just fixed a belt. Any decent guy would have done the same." "But most wouldn't risk their job to help a stranger. You did." Dylan shrugged. "I'm a single dad. Guess I hope someone would help me if I was the one in that ambulance." Julian studied him for a long beat. "You know engines. But do you know innovation?" Dylan raised a brow. "I know how to get things running when they're ready to die." Julian smiled slightly. "I'm building something new. a division that makes purpose-driven vehicles, ambulances, fire engines, electric utility trucks, reliable, affordable, built for the people who keep the world turning. Dylan leaned forward, unsure where this was going. I need someone who understands real-world mechanics. Grit, heart, not just engineers in glass towers. I want you on my team, Dylan, not as a grease monkey, but as a partner. The words stunned him. Just days ago, he was unemployed and invisible. Now, the CEO of Heartline was offering him a chance not just to work, but to shape the future. Dylan looked down at his calloused hands. He thought of Eli, the busted heater, the unopened bills, the hunger for dignity. "You're serious?" he asked. Julian nodded. "Come see the shop. If you want in, it's yours." Dylan didn't have to think long, because sometimes the road back to hope starts with a broken-down ambulance, and a door that opens when you least expect it. Dylan stood at the threshold of a place unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't a garage, it was a vision made real. Sleek metal walls lined with automated lifts, digital displays tracking diagnostics in real time, toolboards that shimmered under spotless LED lighting. The scent wasn't oil and sweat, it was ozone, electricity, and ambition. "This is your new playground," Julian said, his voice echoing slightly in the expansive workshop. Dylan slowly stepped forward, awe in every footfall. He passed a concept ambulance, its hood open to reveal an electric core wrapped in blue light. Everything inside was clean, efficient, nothing like the rusted-out engines he used to coax back to life. "You'll have a team," Julian continued, "engineers, designers, tech specialists, but I want you to lead the hands-on department, field testing, real-world troubleshooting. Your instincts are the missing piece." Dylan turned, eyebrows raised. "You sure someone like me fits in here?" Julian gave a wry smile. "You don't. That's the point. This place has enough people who color inside the lines. I need someone who sees the world in grease stains and duct tape, and still makes it run." He handed Dylan a key card. "Your office is through that door. You'll find a clean uniform inside. Benefits start today. I've also arranged for a company apartment, closer to the facility. Fully covered. For you and your son." Dylan nearly dropped the card. "Wait. How did you—" "I saw his picture on your workbench the day I came to thank you. I figured any man who'd give up his job for a stranger probably has someone depending on him." Dylan swallowed hard. No one had ever looked at his struggle and seen more than need. No one had ever offered something without strings. Later that evening, Dylan brought Eli to the apartment, a modern two-bedroom with big windows and a view of the city skyline. Eli raced through the hallways like it was a mansion. "Dad, there's a dishwasher and 2 bathrooms." Dylan laughed, a sound that had been buried too long. He watched his son spin in circles in the living room, and for the first time in years, he felt not just relief, but pride. The next morning, Dylan arrived at the garage, his garage, wearing the new uniform, still rough around the edges, but clean, sharp. He ran his fingers along the polished hood of the electric rescue vehicle, imagining all the lives it might save. As his team gathered for their first meeting, he looked around the circle. Young mechanics, quiet engineers, a welder with scars on her forearms, a tech whiz barely out of college. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat. "I know I don't look like your average leader, but I know what breaks, and I know how to fix it. Not just machines, but trust, too. Let's build something that matters." There was silence, and then one by one, heads nodded. And somewhere high above, watching through glass walls, Julian smiled to himself. Weeks passed, and Dylan found his rhythm in the new world. Each morning, he walked into the innovation garage with his sleeves rolled up and a mind humming with ideas. But this wasn't just about machines anymore. It was about proving he belonged. The electric ambulance project moved forward under Dylan's lead. He pushed boundaries, insisted on real-world trials, and wasn't afraid to speak up when the designs didn't feel road-ready. At first, the engineers resisted. After all, Dylan had no degree, no fancy training. But when his gut instincts saved them from a critical overheating issue no one else saw, respect followed. One Thursday afternoon, as clouds gathered heavy over the city, Dylan was testing the prototype on a closed suburban track. He drove the ambulance himself, logging response time, corner grip, and brake fluid behavior. The rain started as a drizzle, then turned fierce. By the time he pulled into the garage, he was soaked, smiling and shouting updates to the team like a man possessed by purpose. Julian watched from the upper window. He saw something in Dylan, a fire that couldn't be taught. Later that night, the storm worsened. Lightning ripped across the sky. A power outage knocked out several city blocks. Hospitals went to backup generators. Roads flooded. It was chaos. Then the call came. One of the company's prototype ambulances, Dylan's design, was requested by emergency services to aid in a high-priority patient transport. The roads were flooded, traditional rigs too heavy. They needed something fast, lightweight, and agile. They needed Dylan's machine. Julian called Dylan directly. "You're the only one who knows it inside out. Can you drive it?" Without hesitation, Dylan answered, "Tell me where to go." He didn't tell Eli he was leaving. Didn't need to. His son was asleep, curled up under a blanket in their new apartment. Safe. That was enough. Navigating the city streets that night felt like threading a needle through a hurricane. Torrents of water rushed at the wheels. Visibility dropped to feet. But Dylan pressed forward. The patient was a child, a 7-year-old girl with a failing heart. As he drove, memories of Eli's past fevers and hospital visits flashed through his mind. He knew this fear. He carried it once. When he finally pulled into the pickup site, paramedics loaded the child into the rig. Dylan adjusted the onboard diagnostics, activated the shock absorption, and hit the accelerator. He didn't think of being a mechanic or an employee. He thought only of the little girl behind him and the father who might be waiting at the hospital, hands trembling, praying for a miracle. They made it. Seconds before a backup generator died at the hospital, Dylan's ambulance arrived. The medical team rushed her in. No time for thanks. He sat behind the wheel, drenched, exhausted, the weight of the night crashing down on him like the storm outside. That's when he heard the voice. "You saved another life tonight." Julian stood beside the rig, soaked to the bone, but smiling. Dylan looked up, barely able to process. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see it for myself. What you built, what you are." He placed a hand on the vehicle's hood. "This isn't just about engines or electric grids. It's about people. You reminded me of that. You reminded the whole company." For the first time, Dylan didn't just feel respected. He felt seen. 2 weeks after the storm, the company's headquarters buzzed with anticipation. Every major auto executive, investor, and media outlet gathered for a special press unveiling. The world's first fully electric rapid response ambulance, engineered for performance and compassion. Behind the stage curtain, Dylan stood alone in the wings, adjusting the collar of the clean black button-up Julian had sent him. It wasn't the coveralls he was used to, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. Eli sat front row with a tiny badge clipped to his chest. Inventor's son. He beamed up at his dad like he'd already won the world. Julian took the stage first. In a crisp, calm voice, he spoke about innovation, about the responsibility of legacy. But then he paused, scanning the crowd. His voice softened. "We build cars that change the world, but sometimes the world changes us first." One man reminded me what this company was founded for. Not profits, not prestige, but people. He gestured toward the curtain. "Dylan Carter, will you join me?" For a split second, Dylan froze. but then he stepped forward, not as a mechanic or a guest, but as a creator. The applause was thunderous. Julian handed him the mic. Dylan looked out at the sea of faces, then down at his son. His voice cracked slightly. I used to think fixing cars was all I'd ever be good at. I was fine with that. But then, life showed me that sometimes doing the right thing, just once, can open a road you never expected. He gestured toward the sleek white and blue ambulance behind him. This vehicle isn't just metal and wires. It's proof that ordinary people given a chance can do extraordinary things. I didn't go to college, I didn't have connections, but I had a son and a reason to keep trying. The crowd was silent, not because they weren't moved, but because they were. Later, after the event, Julian found Dylan alone in the design bay, examining the engine like a father checking a crib. Julian handed him a small envelope. Inside was a letter, formal and gold embossed.